Welcome to another edition of Throwing Down Some Heavy Light. My name is Jamal Binding. I'm the chair of the board of MORE, Moving to Omaha for Race Equity. And this is another program that we're bringing to the community to talk about some of the issues related to social justice, also community and political and social engagement, but more than anything to help deconstruct some of those issues that people don't address all the time in our community. In this show, we have Sarah Johnson, who I actually met in Scott Blake through watching them on a YouTube video and also seeing them basically on Facebook talking about some of their agendas dealing with the city council. And again, they're very much involved in city council issues. Sarah Johnson ran for city council about a year or so ago in District 1. It was unsuccessful. And since then, she's continued to be engaged in City Council Club program, which is what I saw. And Scott Blake is her significant other spouse, and he's also involved in challenging systems and raising issues. So we decided to invite this tag team on to throw out some heavy light to help bring a little bit of knowledge about why they do what they do, the importance of it, and it's also some of their frustration. There was an article in the recent Noise publication, as well as the Reader, talking about Sarah's expose or dealing with issues related to frustration with our elected officials who don't respond to constituents and so on. I thought that was more appropriate and timely to kind of raise this interview around that. So I'm going to start off first by saying, first, can you both share a little bit more about yourself to the viewing audience?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for having us. It's fun to get to chat with you and just respect a lot about what you do. So grateful to be here. But yeah, I'm Sarah Johnson. I don't really know what my title is these days. I actually just quit my job. I was doing some work with Mode Shift Omaha, which is a transportation equity nonprofit that I actually helped co-found over a decade ago. So I've been involved in advocacy, mostly in the transportation mobility justice realm since about when I moved back to Omaha in 2009. I used to own a small business in Benson, the Omaha Bicycle Company, which was a bike and coffee shop, kind of a community hub. We would have weekly potlucks that we would kind of talk about, advocacy issues and that sort of thing. So I've always been involved with trying to push the city for more. When I moved back to Omaha in 2009, I mean, I was born and raised here, so it's my hometown, but I just feel like we could be doing a lot better. And didn't really think I was going to be here for that long when I moved back in 2009 from Colorado, but then realized, you know what, this place has so much potential and so many brilliant, kind, genuine, generous people. A lot of them are not in positions of power, unfortunately, but so I kind of got sucked in and have been here ever since. So now, yeah, married this guy in 2020. I closed my bike shop in 2019 and planned to kind of just I had a lot of health issues. I've had multiple surgeries over the years, still not doing great health-wise. But after I closed my shop, I was going to kind of take a break. And then that break turned into me running for office. I don't recommend that as part of a recovery from a surgery, but I just could not stand the lack of discussion with so many important topics. And also Pete Festerson has been there for too long and he's, right, not the worst, but I don't know. I'll pass it to Scott.
Scott.
Yeah, I'm Scott Blake. I moved to Omaha in 2004, originally from Florida. I'm mainly an artist. I do lots of art online with barcodes and computers. I got involved with politics maybe around 2014. I did a lot of work on the death penalty, kind of on my own. I played a very small but significant role in getting that repealed. And then I met Kitrin Zeichel, and we worked a little bit on the Mondo. I should say I helped her with her work with Mondo and Ed. And then, yeah, I met Sarah in 2016, and we've just been tag teaming it ever since. I finally you got me registered to vote in 2017, so I voted my first time in 2018. And I'm really into spreadsheets and sort of doing historical research on things that there was a big void in the city council. So just kind of we're teaching self-taught, teaching each other. Trying to have fun while we're doing it.
So fun.
Let me ask you this, and one of the things that as I was watching the program, how did this concept of the Omaha City Council Club start? This program that you've been doing, which is very critical and deconstructs the city council agenda. But how did that begin for you guys?
Yeah. Well, I've been going to city council, like I said, for, over a decade at this point. Actually, before I had my shop in Benson, I managed a different shop and we were closed on Tuesdays so I could be at city council. So it's not a new thing for me to be there. But the idea of council club, we came up with it when I was running because a lot of the folks that I was having discussions with, just phone calls and talking to neighbors, that sort of thing, people don't know what city council is and
Right.
how important those decisions are that are being made. And we realized, I mean, part of what I ran on was trying to make city council more accessible for more folks because 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon is, as so many of these systems are, designed to exclude. And we thought that was terrible. We still think it's terrible. And it only allows a privileged few to participate. And so we decided that it was important enough to keep this conversation about city council going year round, not just during election season. And so we realized that if we did it on Thursday nights, that's when the agenda comes out for city council, is weekly on Thursdays. So 7:30, almost every Thursday night, we meet on Zoom to just kind of digest the agenda together, and it's open to whoever. And we just kind of, realized that if we brought more voices to the table and had more conversations with more folks from different perspectives and helped inform and educate ourselves as well as whoever wanted to show up, that it would be hopefully better for transparency and accountability.
Now, by the way, what was your expectation and goals as you started this program? I mean, were there outcomes or outputs you expected when you started your program?
Not really. I mean, I guess a little bit of what we just touched on is just like sharing more information more broadly and more accessibly. Because 2 o'clock on a Tuesday, just not that many people can participate. And we all, learn together, like we were saying, is just kind of a group educational opportunity. The goal at this point, I mean, when we started, I don't really know that I specifically had any goals for it, except for to just like shine more light on the importance of these counselors and get better folks in those seats in 4 years.
Right.
But
I think you're aiming for like accountability. I'm just remembering like when Colleen Brennan was appointed, geez, that would have been 2012. It was a while ago, but before we did Council Club,
2020.
and just how she sailed through and how it blew up, and how we kind of wish that if there would have been someone watching this or doing a Council Club before that, we could have stopped Colleen Brennan from getting in. But now, a year or two later, I feel like there is no accountability. The mayor and the city council, I mean, pretty much anyone in government is beyond reproach. You can't critique them. And so it's kind of,
but we do anyway.
yeah, we're still figuring it out. But I think mainly just to kind of learn you can't take a class at UNO or anywhere on city council. So we decided just to make our own course up and sort of self-taught. And
we're not experts. And that's the thing that we always preface every, council club meeting with, is like, we're all here to learn together. There's no such thing as a stupid question, no shame. This is really complicated stuff a lot of times. And so we're all just really learning together, and just kind of there's no shame in not knowing what's going on. And we call it commiseration club, because like, we're like, we don't really know what our goals are except for to like, virtually hug each other, get through this junk in Omaha and just try to like keep each other okay.
And just in the short time, I think we started in May. So what are we at? 7 or 8 months? We know for a fact that certain council members do not read the agenda as closely as we do. Sometimes we point stuff out to the city council members that they had no idea, or they thought that something was going to be on the agenda. We're like, no, that's not going to be on the agenda for like a month. Like, they're like, oh, good, thank you. But there's been times when we point stuff out to them.
Oh, they actually said that to you at some point?
Yeah, I don't want to say who, it would be embarrassing, but yes, there's been at least one instance where we had to correct a council member that didn't know what was on the agenda.
The day before, I saw this person on a Monday outside of City Hall on an unrelated thing. And they were like, oh, Sarah, because we used to go to city council every Tuesday. And they were like, oh, see you tomorrow, right? Are you excited about the new, are you going to be there? I'm worried about a lot of pushback on the development at 39th and Dodge. And I was like, oh, that's actually not on tomorrow's agenda. Like, you should come to council club. We would have known that, but so it's just kind of, it's just tough because these people really do make important decisions with our money about our futures without really taking it as seriously as I wish they would.
Now, one of the questions that most people in the community don't always know about this concept called consent agenda. Those who serve on board of directors do that to get things run-rotted in, or is not debatable because they kind of pretty much agree through osmosis or through consensus, as they would say. And you indicated they do a great deal of this deliberation in private back room in City Hall in one of your programs. Explain that a little bit back to our viewing audience. What does that mean when they do a consent agenda and they do meetings in the back room instead of doing it out in public? What is that about here in Omaha?
So I'm currently going through, so there's the consent, well, there's the agenda, and then there's the journal, which is basically the meeting minutes. And it's taken me a long time, but I'm going back through and basically making a record of how they voted. If anyone came to speak in opposition, was it denied, was it postponed? And it's not 100% of the time, but it's close. I'd say 99% of the time, the consent agenda is a big block. It'll be like 30 or 40 items. Usually they all get voted on together. Every once in a while, they'll pick an item out to have a further discussion on. But yeah, board appointments, street renaming, money for police, a lot of stuff will get in the consent agenda. It'll go on the agenda Thursday. You have 5 days to read through it, to see if you want to talk about something, to engage with your council member. But 99% of the time, there is zero discussion and it is voted 7-0. So I kind of feel like, yeah, consent agendas where they go just to
Rubber stamp.
Yeah. I mean, but then the rest of the agenda is also pretty much 99% of the time it's voted on 7-0 with little to no discussion.
I will say there is a little bit of pushback, you know, with the last election. We have a few board members or counselors now who will push back on stuff or at least ask some questions, which is refreshing. But yeah, for the most part, it's still, you know,
It's painful.
it is. And it's been already decided. I mean, a lot of times, you know, sometimes we go to the pre-council meeting where they'll have discussions about the agenda as the council before they actually, you know, have their 2 o'clock meeting. And they bring up issues that they have ahead of time. But yeah, it just definitely seems like on a lot of the big issues, sometimes, I mean, like with this library thing, we just saw how left in the dark the entire city council was. How embarrassing for them that they're so worthless to the mayor that she would have all of these decisions already figured out. We don't really need you to do anything except for push it on through. So, you know, unfortunately, more of the same.
One of the things that I've been working on for many years is getting more grass tops and grassroots, and particularly low-income families, to challenge elected officials in terms of raising public policy issues. We have a number of surrogate organizations in our state and in our community that claim sometimes to speak for folks. And my question back to you is, in light of what you guys have been doing, what's the best way to communicate to elected or public officials from your vantage point?
I'm so jaded at this point. Like, I'm like, don't try, it doesn't work. But I don't want to say that. I want to say I'm stepping back because I'm so like tired and jaded and I'm not sure that it works. But, you know, I have heard from others that emails do get responded to. So that's good. You know, for a while we were going to city council to testify about items so that, you know, even if the city council isn't paying attention, sometimes the public who's watching might pick up something that you say in a testimony piece, or the media or something like that. So I don't want to say it's completely worthless, but we're just kind of burnt out. But I'd say email is probably, I don't know what works. That's the problem at this point.
And there was a previous city council member that boasted at city council that he reads almost every email, but responds to none of them. And he said this proudly.
Why?
Because
he doesn't have to.
Yeah, this is on his, you know, his 4th term. So why? But I think it was kind of just to put people in their place. Like I go back and forth between, like, if they're there to listen to the constituents, I worry that they're going to start listening to Larry. And if you don't know who Larry is, do you know who Larry Store is at city council? He actually goes to the school board. He goes to all these meetings. And frankly, I don't want them to listen to Larry. I think they know, every once in a while, Amy Melton will let him go on and talk about critical race theory when it's not on the agenda. And so I go back and forth, but I do feel like they should be listening to the experts. And every once in a while, if your name or your business is on the agenda, they will listen to you and they will expect you to come down and speak and answer any questions. But if you're just a normal person that is not on the agenda, they're not going to listen to you.
Although they should sometimes, because lived experience, you don't have to be an expert with a degree and whatever to have an important opinion, and sharing those experiences should not be just completely ignored. Sure, there are extremes like Larry on one side and I don't know, us on the other, if you look at it that way. But I think that it's just unfortunate that there's not the accountability that we would like to see, where like if you email your city council and they don't respond, what are the repercussions? There aren't any. So
And the reason I raised that is there was a time where I mailed a letter to 12 school board members back in the day, and only I think 2 responded. One mailed my envelope back with the stamp, and the other one used my stamp and mailed me back a letter, but the other 10 didn't respond. And I got very frustrated because I'd asked them like 2 or 3 simple questions that anyone can answer, and they basically ignored it. And again, one of the things, you have district elections, you would hope those elected officials would go back to the district. And I'll use the school board example, even though you're talking about city council. I can't think of one time they've had a district meeting in the community, and my school board member rarely have responded to my correspondence. I do write letters, hard copy letters you mail in US postal snail mail, and they don't deal with it. So I understand, as astute as I am, are politically understanding the system. If they don't respond to me, what about other lower income or grassroots folks who may not have some of the skills that I have? I was going to switch up and ask you, in our first culture program, you were with Cheryl Weston rather, on the program. And she was talking about that whole issue of redistricting the city council and the inability to understand racial issues. And I know you guys had bannered a little bit on that program. What came out of that meeting or that conversation? Because you guys were really adamant about that, including Cheryl.
yeah, I want to just point out how good he is at making maps, because when we were talking about redistricting, the freaking people at city council didn't even have maps as detailed as Scott Blake's, who doesn't, like he's just doing all this because we're nerds. And so I think that just like really seeing the map.
Wait, you lost me. Hold on, let me stop. Are you saying the actual city council members who districts will be withdrawn in different ways, they had not seen the maps of this proposed thing? How's that possible?
Well, so they put out one map, but it didn't have. So I'm really, like I said, I'm good at computers, and I basically took the old map and the new map and overlapped them, and then highlighted all the places, all the lines that were moving. That's the part they didn't have. And so you had to either have all the districts memorized and know exactly where they turn and where they are carved.
Yeah, street by street boundaries, which.
And so I just made it a little more
user-friendly and accessible.
And then actually, so that with the redistricting, I went through all this time making all these maps. Come to find out, they waited until the absolute last meeting of the year
to push it through.
It was going to be voted on, I think, on December 21st. And if it wasn't, they were going to get fined by the state, or it was going to cause a whole ripple for the midterm elections. And so I almost gave up. I almost gave up, saying like they couldn't send the maps back to be reworked.
But they could propose amendments.
Yeah, but then Ernie Chambers came to the city council, and I think he scared them into listening. They actually did listen to him, and we got one precinct, the North Downtown precinct, which I was the one that went through and listed all the businesses and apartments and places that are going to be moving from. It was like TD Ameritrade Park was going to be moving from District 2 to District 3. Gallup, all of
the assets,
the
like
Joslin Art Museum, yeah, and that was the one district that they switched with Begley. I think Bemis Park. Anyway, so that actually I feel like was the smallest of wins, but I literally only focused on District 2 because it took me a long time to go through and draw the little lines everywhere. But all the districts had some wackiness going on, but I didn't have time. I was just like, so.
But you would think, Scott, that there would be some public or functionary officials who would have more of a community conversation. And I discovered years back in the planning department, we actually had a meeting with the land bank, and they were there. And I remember one of their staff members made some comments, and it was basic, mundane, germane comment. And afterwards, he came up and apologized. And, oh, well, I technically can't speak it. All he was doing was providing information. And I'm saying, if the guy was that petrified or afraid of his job, what he's doing in a job like that when the public asks you a basic, simple question about something related to your job every day. So I came somewhat disheartened about that. And then the last point, I actually talked to a previous well, it might be current, but I talked to a city planner and he says when the previous administration left, they gutted all the computers and information they had because someone was writing books, they were doing self-serving dances, and they also basically didn't keep, well, I guess we don't have a law like in the presidential level where you got to keep all your official documents for the next administration. They just kind of take their stuff with them and use it in their private consultancy work. But I was surprised he told me that out of his mouth to my ears, that a lot of the stuff we're looking at historical in terms of race, interstate, things like that that went on, they had no record of that. And I was like, you got to be kidding. There should be a public archive of all the stuff that is happening in this city related to, you know, racial distribution or just in general. And he says, no, it was gone. And I don't think he did anything to pursue it because, again, some functionaries just want to keep their job and they won't challenge their systems. But Emily, go ahead.
I could speak all day on redistricting and re-precincting. I got really into, so when Sarah was running for city council, I was her data campaign helper. And I made these insane maps showing, so vote by mail there was a huge spike in vote by mail. But I found out that Douglas County does not, if your ballot was rejected, they do not contact you. Sarpy County does.
Why not?
Because they don't want to. Sarpy County does, Pottawatomie County does, but Douglas County, the biggest county in Nebraska with the most voters, does not contact, it's called ballot curing. And so I made a chart or a map showing where were the most ballots rejected. Do you want to guess which district had the most ballots rejected?
Wow, I could guess. Gotta be North.
Yeah, so I did it by city council, it was District 2. And then I broke it down even further by legislative districts. District 11, Terrell McKinney's district, had the highest rate of rejected ballots. And I was screaming this from the hills, like, who's going to be curing these ballots? I started calling phone numbers on the voter database and being like, hey, do you know your ballot was, rejected? Most people forgot to sign it, or it was, they changed addresses, and so it was undeliverable. No one knew. I'm literally the only person doing this ballot.
And by the way, I'm sure they're paying some big money for that, right, Scott? Was you getting paid a lot of money for doing this work? Why are you laughing? I'm not laughing. I'm sure they paid you some money.
Not a dime, not a dime.
But then and then in October, they redrew the precinct lines. This is something I'm learning about. And so Omaha, basically each precinct is where your polling place is.
Right.
And in the so this most recent re-precincting, Omaha is losing 12 precincts. This is over the 10-year period. Our population increased, our voter turnout increased, and we're losing polling places.
Wow.
Every district, thankfully, it's spread out pretty evenly, but District 2 is going to be losing, I think, 2 polling places. And not only that, but the precinct lines are all over the place. I think maybe only 2 precincts in the entire of Omaha stay the same. And so I estimate over 50% of voters are going to have a new polling place this May.
And they may not even know that.
Because no one's talking about it.
Hey, by the way, in your program, one of your programs, you cited the wealth and corporations operate the city. What made you arrive at that statement?
Well, because we live here, we pay attention to what's happening. Like, oof, again, I'll just talk about the library because that's like the big last thing that we all just witnessed before our eyes without any input. And that is based on the wills and desires of the Mutual of Omaha folks, like once again, profit over people. That is Omaha's MO. And it's unfortunate, but even just the language that Stothard uses when she speaks, she calls residents taxpayers. If you aren't paying for it, you don't get to decide about it. Like she literally said that. And since our taxes aren't going up, why would she bother us lowly citizens to like influence her whatsoever? So it really is. You look at who gets the contracts, who donates to her campaign, who gets the contracts, who donates to the campaign. Like as with a lot of, I'm not saying this is unique to Omaha by any stretch. I think it's just like capitalism, right? But follow the money. And unfortunately, that is very easy to do in Omaha.
And I had the opportunity to hear you speak about the bastardization of the TIF program. Some people don't know about TIF in Omaha. Explain why that TIF is important to folks. And probably some people don't even understand what TIF means, that concept. So can you give us a little kind of a brief what TIF means and why are we polluting that concept in Omaha with some of the things that have been proposed in recent months?
Yeah. So TIF, tax increment financing. And basically what it means is if a developer buys a piece of property here for this value, their taxes are not going to be, I mean, the taxes will be going up on the property, but they don't have to pay that increase, that increment for 15 or 20 years, depending on if it's blighted or extremely blighted. Senator Wayne, adjusted the state law and created the extremely blighted designation. I'm pretty sure he meant it to be, helping folks in North and South Omaha, the areas that really could use some attention and some investment and some money, and the historically excluded communities. What does Omaha do? They say, oh, wow, extremely blighted. Let's do that a block away from the most valuable piece of land in Omaha. The library is so valuable, we had to act on that. And literally 1 block west at the Twin Tower Plaza, that's extremely blighted. So it doesn't make sense to people who appreciate like fact and logic. Like, how can this be the most valuable piece of property and literally a block away is extremely blighted? And so what you'll see is developers just apply for TIF left and right. I mean, why wouldn't they? It's free pizza, right? Although nothing's free. And so where does that tax increment that we would be collecting, that 15 or 20 years of tax money, is not going into our communities? It's staying in the developers' pockets. So.
And I know, Jamal, you did I think you did a Zoom or a video conference with Brian Smith, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, it was a couple of years, and it was Jack Dunn, because Jack's been running with this TIF for us on More for many years, and so we decided to bring both of them in to kind of talk about why that's important, and particularly how it impacts communities of color, particularly low-income communities that are really blighted and need some financial support.
That actually could be benefiting from this. Instead, it's abused. And a lot of communities have actually given up on TIF because they've realized how ridiculous it is and how it is being abused. And, of course, Omaha is using it to fund casinos. Like, we're again on the opposite end of the spectrum. Not only are we saying, wow, it's being abused, we're saying, how much can we abuse it? Oh, casinos, sure.
And we thought we had an in with, I'll say we had a conversation with Don Seaton. He lives in our neighborhood close by, and I saw him on the Nextdoor app, and I was like, Don Seaton from the TIF, he's a TIF guy.
Yeah, in the
and so we started talking with him, and we specifically on how can Blackstone still be blighted. You've got a specialty meatball restaurant.
Yeah, nothing says blighted like
mini bowling. I do believe that's where Berkshire Hathaway, where Warren Buffett's offices are. That's extremely blighted. I'm sorry, I think it says regular blighted. And Don Seaton actually agreed and said, you know what? And then we kind of heard Danny Begley also in the background saying, yeah, I don't think Blackstone's blighted anymore. And so we were looking into the process of getting a community redevelopment area, a CRA, undesignated. It's been done before. TD Ameritrade was, it was only 2 years. It was blighted, and then 2 years later, after the project, they unblighted it. And so it can be done, but then the streetcar came in. And the city is not, they're going to create a special TIF district just for the streetcar. And so I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. I just did some more research on since June, since the 3 new members were inaugurated this past June, they've approved 15 TIF projects totaling $62 million. It was 101 yes votes, 1 no vote. It was Don Rowe opposed the Warhorse Casino. And so I expect all the future TIF votes to be no different. And I honestly feel like, talking about going to city council and arguing about TIF is a waste of your time.
Yeah. As you're talking, you express a notion that our system is run like a plantation city, meaning, people who are taxpayers or residents, and you don't have to be a taxpayer. You could just be a resident. You should be able to weigh in on things that are going on in your neighborhood or in your city. And these elected officials act as if they ignore the folks, or they speak for everybody when they get down there in those seats and they don't deal with that. I was going to ask you about more. We're concerned about racism and anti-racism policy, both local and state government. From your perspective, how are we doing in terms of race relations? And also, do you know real people of color who work in government, and are there information or public positions within those systems? So it's kind of a convoluted 3-part question. Number one, what do you think of race relations in our community or in our that? And then also, do you know any people of color who work in city or local government?
I think we talked about this earlier, just Malcolm X and how Omaha, you wouldn't know that Malcolm X was born in Omaha unless you do some big digging. We don't celebrate him like we should. And so as far as race relations go, we have in our notes, we're doing terrible. I brought up that, so Vivian Strong was shot in 1969. I made a map to find out exactly where she was shot in the Fontenelle Housing Authority. It almost lines up with the corner of what is now Fontenelle Park. I think that Omaha should rename Fontenelle Park the Vivian Strong Park. And if the city won't do it, I think that the locals should start calling that Vivian Strong Park, because they're not going to do it on their own. And I know that, I know we have the Will Brown Memorial. That was 100 years later. So maybe in 100 years, we'll take a step forward. But I'm not going to wait that long. I don't think
it's terrible. Yeah, I just, it blows my mind that we cannot as a community acknowledge that we have a racism problem. We are still a segregated community. I mean, there's this toxic positivity problem in Omaha where we're just like, oh, everything's fine. I have a Black friend. It's like, oh my God, like we have to get real about our past before we can move forward in a way that will actually be beneficial to the entirety of our community. And until we can actually deal with these uncomfortable facts, as I started this conversation, I'm not real hopeful these days, so I don't mean to be such a Debbie Downer, but no, I think it is terrible. I think we have a lot of work to do. I think, I was impressed with what the union did with the redlining exhibit to really like get people understanding that this was not that long ago and we are still seeing the effects of it. So I do think, and Moore is doing good work. There's some groups out there that are trying to move the needle, but unfortunately, the folks at the top aren't making the efforts, or they, not to just call out Tommy Warren, but like there's someone who is, in the mayor's office. He used to be the police chief. He's dancing around the legality of being able to be paid twice, it's just, I don't know. Or the example of, anytime there's a board and commission appointment and the mayor like recycles the same handful of people of color. It's like, oh my goodness, we need to understand that, again, we have a brilliant, beautiful, diverse, just amazing city if we would tap into all of it.
Right, and then also in democracy, the more people you bring cycle in and cycle out, the more you get different ideas and points of view. But what we have is this stagnation. And going back to your point you made earlier, one of the things that visitors, when they come to Omaha, and I'm a lifelong resident, is how segregated we are. You have North Omaha, South Omaha, West Omaha, and there are people who never go outside their circle in terms of where they live at. And so they have no clue. And what is most amazing for some folks is they don't know that the city of Omaha is 33% people of color. So if we're talking about hiring our community based on the percentages, you should not walk in any city council meeting or any public meeting where they're all white or they're all of a certain council or a certain group or a club, or I even use the word confederacy, okay? So if we are about as diverse as we say we want to be, then how can I walk into a meeting at UNO and I look at the chancellor's office, I'm talking about years ago, a few years back, and they were all white folks, and we talk about the university. And if they don't have diversity around that table, and I went back to my Black Studies class and say, it looks like there's a Klan meeting going on. And they busted out laughing, and I wasn't being facetious, but I'm saying, how do you have academicians at a university of no opportunity for many people of color who don't graduate on a decent level because they got a plantation education? And we're talking about diversity in 2020, 2019, whatever. And everybody says we want our city to look like our population. That's not possible if we don't have these conversations. 100%. It's just crazy. But I don't want to go on a tirade or a diatribe or whatever, or rant, as we would say. But one thing I noticed on your program, one of the things you said earlier, and I guess Scott and Sarah will throw this out at you, we sometimes talk about what we do, but we don't have good measurements. And I can watch your program. I noticed the lack of notes or comments on your program. How do you measure the effectiveness or efficiency of your program or efficacy, as they say? In other words, is a squeeze worth the juice? And Sarah, you already alluded to it, but how do you know if you're doing a good job or not doing a good job? Even though we may develop relationships, enjoy each other's company, but how do you show if the squeeze is worth the juice and there's outcomes?
Right. No, that's something that we struggle with, to be honest. We don't know. I mean, at this point in time, I'm not sure if the squeeze is worth the juice. I like there because I think that, we really are obviously passionate nerds about this stuff. We, after the library thing, that was that was a hard one for me because I feel like, a lot of us have been trying to show up and trying to email and rally the troops and make a difference and pack City Hall and make sure they get 100 emails and all this stuff. And then to still see it not matter, that was a blow. That was a hard one. So I've personally decided to stop going to City Council. I won't go to City Hall anymore. I don't think it's good for my mental health. So I'm not really sure that it's worth it in like a specific outcomes way. But after that meeting, we had our council club meeting and we didn't record that one. And we just had, a real heart to heart with everyone who showed up. And I said, why are you all here? Like, why do you keep showing up? Because what is interesting to me about it is we have new faces that show up almost every week. And, sometimes there's only 3 of us, sometimes there's 20 of us. So it really kind of depends on the week. But I kind of made everybody go around and say, like, why are you here? Should we keep doing this? Like, it kind of feels like it's blowing my mind in not a good way sometimes. But if it's worthy for all of you, then I'll at least, we'll at least open the Zoom room. And even if I'm not contributing as much, we'll create the circle, so folks can show up. And so many people were like, I have learned so much. I email my city councilor every week. And now, like you have helped us understand what the consent agenda means. What's a resolution? What's an ordinance? How do we impact these things? Who do we contact? How do we, register by Zoom? Now there's an address waiver. We advocated for that. We don't know if we really affected that or if it was just like serendipitous timing, so it's tough, but
I also we talked about how people tend to only care about city council or any sort of elected official, once every 4 years or whenever the election cycle comes around. And we said that if we did council club for 4 years, that we would be able to make the next round of elections just a little bit better. And so we're only a year into it, not even a
year, yeah.
full year. Who knows if we're going to make it all the way to that 4th year?
Who knows if we'll be in Omaha in 4 years to vote for the next round of folks at this point.
But I think if we were to keep it up, I definitely feel like we would have we would have a more intelligent, more informed electorate. And hopefully when we go to vote, we get new people in. I think that's where the real change is when you get to vote every couple of years.
And the other thing I will say just quickly about, because again, transportation advocacy has been kind of my background, and we have had some specific wins from showing up and from emailing and from doing all the things when it comes to transportation policy. So I can't say that it's been completely worthless. As much as I get down on myself or ourselves and just like Omaha in general, there have been some concrete policy changes that we have directly impacted. So I do have to remind myself of that.
Two quick points I want to make here if I can. One is, you allude to this council club thing that you do. Is that the recording I saw when you meet on Thursday? Is that what that is then?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know for sure if it was another meeting or another event, and that's what you post on that. And then the second thing is, we've alluded in this conversation to the library and so on. I suspect some of the people who are watching this or will watch it don't have a clue what we're talking about. Are we talking about the mayor proposing to put the trolley and use public funds, put a trolley from the library down to the medical center? And then number 2, she's talking about giving up the library to was it the Mutual of Omaha to build a big tall building that people, because of COVID-19, are not going into buildings on that level. And who did she get feedback from to do that? I mean, that's what this whole discussion is about, right?
Correct. Yeah, because so if people have been following the library stuff, the library board has been getting a lot of public feedback about do not destroy the downtown library. If we're going to have to move it, why is it such a rush? Like there's been so much pushback and very little transparency on what's happening with the entirety of the project. I mean, a lot of the information came to light after just citizens put together a FOIA or an open records request. Turns out there's code names, Project Lightbright, Project Ducati. And
why is that? What does that mean?
What does that mean? It's not transparent is what that means to me. And so for Tommy Warren, Mayor Stothard's chief of staff, to stand up and say this process has been completely transparent, that's a bold-faced lie. And we have proof of it. But again, where are the consequences? You can lie all day long and you just continue to get reelected. So yeah, the library thing's been extremely convoluted and unfortunate and completely ignorant of the public's will.
But then there's the fiasco with Heritage Services and then moving or privatizing the library, combining it with the due space.
Creating a community
it's all
information
connected.
trust. Yeah.
Yes, literally streetcar, mutual, all of it.
And she throws it all up at the same time so that there's so much going on. It's a distraction technique. And I will I do not agree with 99% of the words that come out of Stothard's mouth, but she is a talented politician. she just says whatever and just moves right along, and it's wild to watch. But the strategery of just kind of being like, boom, streetcar, Mutual of Omaha, library, it's just like such a confusing debacle that no one knows which thing to focus on, and then before you know it, it's like, oh, it's too late, here it is.
One of the things that hit me as we're talking here is that the lack of media investigative reporting, because some of this stuff comes up. And again, you would think our local media would be on top of some of this, exposing some of these shams and these backroom deals. And you sometimes you're going to hear about it through YouTube or the things that you guys say, because
Right.
one of the things I've noticed in recent years, I get more commercials on my local television station. I get programs. And so when I hear people talk, it's sound bites or people are saying kind of stuff they're reading that has no substance to it. So I'd rather read about it and skip parts of it than to hear people make the mumble jumble. But where's the media in some of these conversations that you guys are sharing with us?
It's sad. I feel like part of the reason that I think we created Council Club is because the World Herald is failing, and they were the ones that used to have reporters. I forget. I think Cooper on Courts, Todd Cooper, used to be the city council reporter. I've read reports from him, geez, back in like the 90s, and now he's still at the paper, but they used to have the World Herald had Reese reports down there for a little while, but these people don't have 20 years of institutional knowledge of to actually hold them accountable, not just write down what they say and without any kind of critical analysis. And so it kind of left a space, created a space, made a niche for people like us to sort of fake it till we make it. But I feel like it's a perfect storm right now with the pandemic and the failing newspaper, and I kind of on the tail end of Trump, just kind of you can get away with whatever. I feel like the city council and all the city officials are just like, what are you going to do? They're beyond critique, and I've caught them a couple times. We've caught them a couple times saying things that at first I called them lies, but then they're just like, but they can misspeak. They can they can have their own facts, and no one's going to hold them accountable anymore. And
or the people that try to, it doesn't seem to make enough of a difference. So
We don't have a critical mass is pushing back as in some areas. Now, one of the things that your comment, the city gave the University of Nebraska Medical Center $30 million for a parking garage.
yep.
Some years ago, former Ben Nelson gave Creighton University about 10 million, it might have been 15, for federal funds for a garage. And remember, Creighton is a private Jesuit university that started with enslaving people in the Washington, D.C. area. I mean, they were known for their large plantations on. And I read that in Will Thomas's book, The Third, it talks about enslavement of people in our country. What are these sweetheart deals entities doing to get their funds from the state of Nebraska private sources? In other words, how do we reverse that, and how do they do this? I mean, you shouldn't be able to take money out of a public till and give it to somebody that they didn't get it through their normal funding source. But I heard it's kind of like a little shaky when you take money from taxpayers and give it to your friends of the system. How does that work? And then how can we stop some of that, or can we stop it?
That's a hard one for me. I don't understand it. I don't like it, and I don't know how to stop it. That's the short question. I mean, I, of course, showed up at City Hall and talked about how, we're supposedly passing a climate action plan, and building more parking directly goes against what those ideals would say. We talk about, all these different things. It's UNMC is on the orbit line. Like we have.
Well, by the way, sir, why is that? In other words, I suspect many people who use the library are not going to jump on a trolley and ride all the way up to 42nd Street to go to the, if I want to get on a trolley, I want to go across the city, north, south, east, or west. And why do that when most of us in the city who have public transportation will either take the bus or will sometimes drive if we have a car. But trolley, I mean, what is that, a sightseeing tour? Use that kind of money when there are poor people, hungry, don't have enough food, you don't have enough coronaviruses tests and so on for a lot of our people in the community. What are we doing as a city then? 33% of the city are considered people of color, and I suspect probably about 30% at least are low income or at least working poor. So why are we spending money on trolleys in 2020 when 2022 rather, when we should be spending on much more pressing needs that can help improve the quality of life for many families?
100% agree. I do have to push back. the streetcar to me, and to, I mean, it's not just me. There's a lot of, data out there about streetcars. They exist in other places. It's an economic development tool. Let's be clear. It is
Now
not.
explain that when you say it, because I don't understand. I know economic development for people who build it, but explain what that means, what it would do for us.
It's all about the tax base. It's all about money. Like we were saying, follow the money. So there are some studies that show when you put down the rails, because this will actually be on rails, not just, a little bus. It'll actually be a rail streetcar.
Like in the old days.
Yes, exactly.
San Francisco,
yeah,
right?
Yep. Yeah. So
Rice-A-Roni. I call it Rice-A-Roni vehicles. Okay.
There we go. We'll have to come up with a good name for this one if it happens. But yeah, it's really it's going to go from UNMC downtown, close to the CHI Center. It's not even called the CHI, but Charles Schwab. It'll probably be renamed by the time. Anyway, the convention center down on 10th. And then back up and around. So I call it a white people circulate. Like it's just kind of a, like a flat Ferris wheel. It's just to me, I think it's absurd that we are thinking this is going to solve all of our problems and like really create so much more tax money. The way that they're financing it, and I'm not an accountant, but I have a buddy who's an accountant and she is horrified at this like scheme of how they're going to pay for it. So they're going to get private bonds to finance it up front. And then with that, we're talking about that 15 to 20 years of tax increment. Once that comes, they're going to use that to pay the people back that they borrowed from. It's so screwed up. I'm shocked by a lot of it. But no, it's not transportation. It is there to help people. It is there to incentivize development in the urban core. So
so it's basically like you build a building, but you don't live in it. It's like something like that then.
I don't know about that. I maybe I'm.
In other words, will people ride on this trolley when they got cars downtown anyway? And if you live out on 200th Street, the trolley's not gonna go out there, is it? And if you live north and south, it's not going there, right?
No, it's not. And that to me, and it's gonna be fare free, meaning it's free to ride, which okay, that's good.
So who's paying for that?
That's exactly right. So it is good. They're creating these, again, this TIF district for the streetcar. And they also say that the parking garages and the parking meters are going to help fund its maintenance. They're going to start a whole new transit authority for the streetcar. It's a monster. To me, if we're going to talk about fare-free transit, it needs to go north-south and connect the communities that actually
which has never really done a good job. And I remember Marty Schuker, when he was in city planning, they held a number of sham meetings in the community. And at the end of the day, there was really no really great transportation north and south. And again, if you live in Bellevue or you live west of 100th and 8th and 4th area, you're out of luck. You got to walk all the way down from 132nd or 144th if you want to catch a bus, because bus service can go there. And then again, I just heard that there are buses going in certain parts of Council Bluffs from Omaha in certain times of the day. So it's kind of a bleak transportation. We're not Chicago or New York or DC, obviously, but it's a big challenge here. We're down to the last couple of questions. I want to ask with you, can you share with the viewing audience the time of your programs and how can someone watch you or participate in the programs that you just got through alluding to?
Yeah, so 7:30, pretty much every Thursday night on Zoom. And right now we've had people that have said, oh, are you going to start, your own council club Twitter or your own website or whatever? And at this point, we don't have a website. But if you follow either of us on Twitter, you can find it. If you search the hashtag Council Club, we also have a YouTube channel, and I can send you all the links to everything so that you can put them in the show notes or whatever. But yeah, it's right now, it's definitely open to whoever wants to join. Thursday nights at 7:30 on Zoom.
So if I don't have Twitter and I don't know how to find you, how would I find you if you're just an average person? I mean, is there a way you guys send a link? You say you have no webpage. So basically it's like word of mouth is what you're saying.
At this point, it kind of is, I know, which we go back and forth because again, we've had more people interested and more people wanting to plug in, and I do want it to be more accessible, but I've just been kind of, I'm so sick of social media and another website to manage and another, I don't really want to do that. But I do.
One suggestion I would make to you, and I'm throwing this out, I haven't run it by more board, is that we're looking for folks who have declared anti-racism as one of their priorities, and then we'll put their link on our webpage. And we're happy to have this something if you do that, because we're always looking for a few good people who could say, we are anti-racist. You'll be surprised some people who won't say it.
I am anti-racist.
And that way,
all day long.
We can put it as a link and then encourage people to go to that, because obviously one of the things we're going to ask people to do is talk about how do you build better race relations, how you deal with reconciliation, all the wonderful things to make
Yeah.
a society whole and heal, because obviously we got people who've been traumatized for many years, from Native Americans, African Americans, Asians, whoever else, Latinos, Chicanos, you name it. And we really got to address that before we can deal with some of this stuff, because as you know, we can't have more police officers all the time in every place. We got to get people where we go upstream. And so that's the thing. If you could do that, we might be willing to help you in that whole area of getting constituents or community people engaged in what you do, which is very central to this conversation.
Awesome.
We're down to our last comments, and so I know we got a few minutes, but I want to just give both of you a chance. Are there any closing comments or things you'd like to share with our listening audience, and how can they catch up with you if they want to catch up with you individually or something like that? Do you make your email private, public, or how do you do that if somebody want to catch up with you after all these wonderful words of wisdom that you've thrown down related to heavy light to our listening audience and viewing audience? Give me some words here to close us out.
Well, first, again, I mean, thank you so much. We really, I'll speak for myself. I've enjoyed this conversation and I appreciate the work that y'all do. My email address is just Sarah, SARAH, at omahabicycleco.com. And that's from my old bike shop. So I'm always willing to chat with whoever about any of this stuff, because I really think that it is important. Even though we get down on how hard it is to affect change, I think that if we give up entirely, it'll never happen. So I think it's also okay. I'm just saying this for myself, to remind myself that it is okay to step back once in a while and catch your breath and recoup and kind of like reflect. That's kind of where I feel like I'm at right now. I've been going too hard, too fast for over a decade at this point, and I'm just fried. So we'll continue the council club thing. I don't really know what else I'm doing with my life these days, but always grateful for community conversation. And that's what keeps me in Omaha, is the people. So thank you for being on that list.
I think the best way to get in touch with Council Club is either through her Twitter, SJ_OBC, or to Sarah Johnson on Twitter. And then I'm Scott Blake on Twitter as well. We're both on Facebook and Instagram. We're always posting about when our next meeting is and what we're going to be talking about. I know you're able to find my phone number. I think it's the same way Cheryl Weston once called me out of the blue. So my phone number is on my Facebook. Give me a call, and I'll. I don't know how we got Cheryl on the Zoom call, because I know she's not on Twitter.
Yeah, people just kind of gratefully show up, but we should, I mean, because accessibility is important. And so we should get a little bit better about how to, since it continues to grow and since people still want it to happen, I think maybe we'll do a little bit better job of getting it more accessible. But I think also if you go to YouTube and you search Omaha Council Club, that's another way.
Good. You know, as we close out, one of the things I would say, thank both of you for being on the show. I didn't know we'd get such a marvelous tag team. I made a joke at the beginning about using that phrase, but it definitely is a tag team, the way you guys go back and forth. But more than anything of this show and what we're about is, how do we measure effectiveness? And I think Senator McKinney raised an issue earlier in the year, last year, where he says you got all these nonprofits getting all this money and the poverty rate still goes up. You got all these folks getting all this money saying they're going to help our community, and the rich get richer. And you look at Amazon, you look at Walmart, all these different folks, they're making money off a pandemic, and the victims of American democracy don't get it. So what we got to do is start to figure out, what does the demographic say? Are the organizations delivering what they say? And I come from this cynical notion that you can get rid of a lot of the nonprofits because they're not doing the work that they purport to do. Because if they did, we wouldn't be having some of these conversations about income disparities generations after generations. And some people have even argued that America is a caste system. And people get angry when you say that sometimes. But at the end of the day, if someone can predict their income level based on their grandparents and foreparents, and they haven't moved out of that poverty level, then what does that say about us? I don't think all these generations of people are just outright lazy or just inept or whatever. Our system is not geared to helping some of the most neediest people. So I really appreciate y'all coming on, deconstructing our elected local officials to hopefully make them more accountable. So we hope we can join us again at another point.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And we hope that the viewing audience get a chance to communicate with us. Obviously, go to our webpage, moreomaha.org, and get a chance to communicate and share with us potential shows that you may want us to interview. And our role as a facilitator. So thank you very much. We always end our program. May the force be with you. Baroko.